The Acoustics 5050s arrive at an interesting segment in the market, promising near full-range performance in a relatively compact package. After extensive listening with my usual mix of a little bit of everything, I've discovered that these speakers offer something genuinely special for a lot of users, though they demand careful consideration of room and system matching, and we're going to touch on all of that. So, likely in the next week or so, my wife and I are expecting our fourth child. I filmed a number of videos over the weekend in anticipation that I might be out of office for a week or so coming up here. So stay tuned this week. We're going to have a number of videos coming, a bit of a mix of everything. And if you could, please send a subscription this way, drop a comment down below, and even just like the videos to help push these out. Consider it contributing to my new baby fund. Thanks, guys. These aren't your typical tower speakers. The 5050s are shorter than average, but compensate with extra cabinet depth. That kind of creates this footprint that's easier to accommodate into a lot of modern living spaces. The driver configuration is two 6-inch continuum curved cone drivers flanking a 1-inch soft dome tweeter. Acoustics developed these curved cone drivers specifically to achieve two goals: smoother crossover integration and then stronger bass dynamics. The curve profile, neither flange nor straight edge, represents a twist over what is normally expected at this price point as far as general design and innovation goes. Inside each cabinet, you'll find point-to-point bracing and 4 Helmholtz resonators designed to reduce standing wave buildup. Sophisticated touches often reserved for more expensive designs, I'd say. Well, honestly, the point-to-point bracing isn't really far-reaching beyond the norm in this range, but the Helmholtz resonators are a nice touch here. The build quality tells two stories. Acoustics has clearly invested the budget wisely, as it does look really nice. The veneer is on point, there's a mix of materials that gives it character beyond just a single tone, and the curve of the box has a very organic feel in your space. But the outrigger support wings that prevent tipping feel a little bit less substantial than I would prefer on a speaker of this size. It still looks better than 4 simple spikes at the bottom, but I just felt like this was an opportunity for a bit more. And the magnetic grills, it's kind of the same deal. They function well and they have, at very least, the magnet connection over the pegs. But I'd prefer just maybe something a little more here. And honestly, I just prefer the looks of these with them off. They look really nice. And I also prefer all speakers with the covers off, so I guess it is what it is here. Let's see those woofers, am I right? The 5050's most impressive achievement is how they match the bass extension with articulation. Working down to approximately 37 Hz, they lay down a weighty and rhythmically solid foundation that never feels bloated or slow. When I play camps by and by, the bass line has genuine weight and excellent definition. On the more dynamic tracks, you feel that chest-hitting impact while still hearing the texture of the bass strings and the attack of each note when you're looking for that texture over quantity type of sound. The low-end capability shows excellent dynamics too. Soundgarden's Rusty Cage demonstrates how these speakers can deliver explosive drum hits while maintaining complete composure. The kick drum has genuine authority, yet the guitar work remains perfectly articulated above it. The bass never bleeds in or masks in on the mid-range, and that's a common problem that you see on a lot of speakers at this price point. What's also impressive is how they handle different bass styles. The rolling, melodic bass in Noah Kahan's productions, it sounds very rich and full, while the aggressive, distorted bass in something like Alice in Chains, it maintains that edge and definition that we all look for. These speakers bob and weave with the music in the best way possible, I'd say. On to the mid-range. That mid-range coherence is really well done here. Vocals are vivid and present without being forward or too aggressive. Playing the Lumineers Ophelia, the lead vocal here has perfect transparency with all the emotional inflection intact. There's a naturalness to the vocals that makes extended listening sessions genuinely pleasurable and more frequent, which is really important here. I found that the acoustic instruments particularly shine. The fingerpick guitars on many of Iron and Wine's tracks have the proper body and resonance. You hear both the fundamental notes and the harmonic overtones that give acoustic instruments their character. There's no boxiness or coloration that I can detect, just clean, articulate reproduction. The transition from that bass through the mid-range, like I noted earlier, is quite seamless. I believe this was the intent of the continuum curve cone design. There's no gap or change in the character as instruments move through their range. A walking bass line maintains its consistent tone, whether it's in the lower registries or moving up through the mid-range territory. On to treble considerations. The treble merits a little bit of attention in system matching on these. With the Cambridge EXA100 and the Hegel H600 integrated amplifiers, the sound from these speakers leans slightly warm in a really nice way. The high frequencies remain smooth and well controlled throughout. It was a really good listen. I found that cymbals have the appropriate shimmer without any of that metallic harshness, and there's a good amount of air and extension without brightness. However, the soft dome tweeters seem sensitive to other electronics in the chain. I had less success with some of the budget class D amps that in certain pairings can carry a bit of a point of emphasis on the top end. I suspect brighter amplifiers might provoke a crisper, potentially less forgiving treble response here. It's not bad and still very enjoyable, but it's worth noting when you're pairing this up. When properly matched, these speakers can sound refined and sophisticated, but the wrong amplifier could tip the balance a touch too forward. This isn't a flaw per se, it's just something to consider when building out your system and knowing what type of sound that you gravitate to. Onto dynamics and scale. These are very exciting speakers that transform listening from passive to active engagement. There's an enthusiasm here that makes you sit up and pay attention to the track, or possibly pick your next favorite. And the 92 dB sensitivity means they're relatively easy to drive. All the amps I tested with had plenty of headroom, but honestly these speakers would sing quite well with even a really low-powered 25 to 30 watt Class A amplifier. That'd likely even be a good tonal match. The impedance shouldn't trouble any competent modern amplifier, so this is definitely a case where you can upgrade the speakers first, and then the amp down the road. They also sound significantly bigger than their modest footprint would suggest. There's scale and transparency here that outclasses a lot of bookshelf plus subwoofer combinations at this price. And if you've ever experimented with this, I say that because bookshelves and subwoofers, you have a lot of flexibility there and you can do a lot with that sound. This matches up pretty well with that characteristic. The layer separation is also very important when describing these. In dense mixes, individual instruments remain distinct and trackable. There's clarity without that analytical coldness. These speakers maintain musicality while revealing plenty of detail. I honestly wouldn't want much more in this particular design as far as the detail goes. I think this is right on that edge where if there was more here, I'd probably say it was a touch too much. As for the room requirements, these speakers absolutely perform best in medium to large rooms. They include port bunks to help address bass buildup in smaller spaces, but that's kind of a compromise in my opinion. With the ports sealed, bass-heavy tracks lose some of that foundation and can sound just a touch lean. When I purchase a speaker, I generally want to take full advantage of the full capabilities and energy it can provide. If you're in a relatively small space, you should probably take note here. You might want to look at something a touch smaller in their lineup, maybe like the 5040. And since we touched on the room size, I want to touch on the room acoustics as well. In all reality, it's going to have a greater effect on what we hear than any amplifier choice. The 5050s are revealing enough to show room problems clearly. If your room has issues, these speakers certainly won't hide them. They'll work with you if your room is decent, but they won't perform miracles in problematic spaces. So take a bit of time with your placement and the results will be very rewarding. It's really quite simple. I mean, just find the proper distance from the wall, the angle into you, measure things. It can really make a huge difference in how these sound. Onto real world performance, and for my typical listening, which is sort of a mix of everything, these speakers deliver genuine musical satisfaction. They're equally convincing on 90s guitar solos, intimate vocals, grunge, and even modern pop. I specifically noted they did really well with weight and space, fully allowing the raw energy of the music to come through with this visceral impact when called upon. In other words, they just kind of make music sound fun. These speakers don't have to live in the music-only realm either. Movie watching also benefits enormously from their dynamic capability and bass extension. Action sequences have proper impact, dialogue remains clear even during the explosive scenes, and while I would still suggest a sub here, especially if this is going to be home theater, you could get by without one if you had to. Definitely a reasonable option for a mix of theater and music here. And as for living with these, after weeks of listening, certain characteristics did become very clear. These speakers don't standardize music. Bad recordings still sound bad. Great recordings sound stunning. They're revealing enough to show differences in streaming quality, yet forgiving enough for everyday Spotify listening. They respond well to positioning tweaks, tone effects, treble energy, and soundstage width predictably. They're not frustratingly fussy, but they do reward a careful setup. Give them space to breathe, feed them decent amplification, and they'll reward you with genuinely engaging musical reproduction. The Q Acoustics 5050 speakers are what I would call an impressive loudspeaker that offers genuine value around its price point. They nail the fundamentals, that rare combination of bass extension, articulation, mid-range coherence, and dynamic excitement that makes you want to keep hitting the next track. And yes, I mentioned the support wings as a missed opportunity. And yes, they demand medium to large spaces. Amplifier matching matters, but these are manageable considerations against their considerable strengths. For the right room and system, these speakers fill the needs for a lot of users. They're not perfect, but they excel where it matters most, making music exciting and emotionally engaging. If your room can accommodate them and you want that near full range sound without having to add in a subwoofer, the Acoustics 5050 could be that sweet spot. If you found this video useful or at least entertaining, please drop a like and a comment down below. It's always good to chat with the community. Take care, talk soon, later.